in many ways is a reflection of what it's going to take to solve this problem, which is it's going to have to involve all the employers, not just the big ones. It's going to have to involve everybody. I think the progress and the program is going to have to be collaborative, because Steve Rodeman, the executive director of PERS, made a comment to me where he said, we don't run one pension program, we run 900 pension programs. And each employer is different. They all have different profiles of their employees. They have different constituencies. Their ability to address some of these financial issues are all different. And so for us to try to give people a blueprint that says, do this and you'll solve the problem, that's not really very realistic. So this is going to have to be collaborative, and the plans are going to have to make sense for every employer, and ultimately I think they're going to have to be driven by every employer. So the question is, how do you do that? The second thing is that I think we need a plan. Now, I don't want to suggest there isn't a plan. There is a plan. The plan to resolve the PERS UAL is essentially to amortize the cost over 20 years. So essentially it says, assume that you have to make contributions larger than what you otherwise would have to pay off this unfunded liability, and they do it over 20 years. So if we don't do anything, what will happen is the plan will execute. Now, no plan is ever static. You don't put it in place now and put it on autopilot for 20 years. You have to continuously look at it every year, every biennium, but essentially the plan will be just pay for it over 20 years. The question I think that was the genesis of this task force is that the best we can do? Aren't there other things we can do to pay down the liability faster? And in doing that and fixing that balance sheet problem, we can also make the P&L, the budget, easier for the employers. And that's why we're all here. What else can we do to try to fix that? So this is about talking to employers about what their plan can be that is hopefully better than just let's pay it off over 20 years. And that is really about what do you have in your operation with your constituencies that can be used to address some of the UAL so that you don't have to pay this out over 20 years. You can make some payments earlier with other resources that you might be able to find. Okay, so that's really what we're getting at with this program. So number one, it has to be collaborative, and every plan has to make sense for every employer, and they've got to own it. And then the second piece is they need a plan, which is the option to develop something that's better than just paying it off over 20 years. Okay? So that's what we're trying to get at. The thought here is that we start with enrolling everybody, and if they want to opt out, if they are fine with the 20-year, pay it over 20 years plan, that's fine. But the idea here being that the presumption would be everybody plays unless they opt out. Okay? If they do decide to participate in the program, they would work with two entities, the PERS board and the state organizations and the staff, to develop a plan that makes sense for them to get the fully funded status over that 20-year period. Hopefully it's better than just pay it over 20 years. So the second piece of the plan would be you get a menu of possible opportunities. You work with the state and technical resources that I'll get to in a second, and the PERS board, to actually work through what are the things we might be able to do, and what impact would that have on our liability, and what impact would it have on the expenses we have to pay every biennium. Okay? And if they are able to identify things that can be done, then they would also have the opportunity to get a partial match from the state. And the idea that we had talked about previously was potentially a 25% match. So the idea would be that hopefully some of the top-down ideas that we develop as a task force, we can use a part of that money to provide a partial match to employers that if they can bring things to the table and help pay down their liability, the state can match that 25 cents on the dollar as an incentive to help them find those things that they might do and address the UAL. Clear so far? So the idea would be if we can find $500 million of top-down resources and we can get it matched at 4-to-1, we'd be able to provide $2.5 billion of reduction to the UAL. So it's a leverage opportunity to do it that way.